Hey guys, in today's brief lecture, we'll be discussing how bad writing leads to political tyranny. Now, in the previous lectures, we saw how laziness would lead to bad writing. And in today's lecture, we'll see how bad writing may in turn lead to political tyranny or absolute totalitarianism. Now, Orwell explicitly connects a culture of bad writing to political tyranny. So, Orwell observes that there are instances in history in which bad writing led to political tyranny. So, he explicitly makes a connection between bad writing and political tyranny. Now, this often happens, right? Whenever you are going through a politically turbulent time period, people might come up with political pamphlets carrying propaganda. And these pamphlets are often termed as propaganda machines. Pamphlets, radio, and even the television shows are considered as propaganda machines. And if it is a pamphlet, it may contain bad writing. It may contain cliched expressions that do not need much thought, which in turn will lead to political tyranny or absolute totalitarianism, whereby the government will be controlling your thoughts. Now, Orwell argues that the normalization of vague prose makes it easier for bad actors to exercise brainwashing. So, whenever you communicate with another person, it should be clear, coherent, and concise. Whenever you speak or write, it must be clear. Whatever that you intend to communicate must be clearly passed on to the next person. When you normalize vague prose, when you normalize prose which does not contain clarity, what often happens is that the politicians may manipulate or brainwash the common public using vague prose. Using unclear expressions, the politicians might manipulate or brainwash their followers and even the general public. They will construct your sentences for you. I quote from Orwell. He says, they will construct your sentences for you, even think your thoughts for you to a certain extent. So this is what happens in a political speech, right? They will fill your sentences for you. They will construct your sentences for you. Even they will think your thoughts for you. When someone is constructing sentences for you, they are taking away your agency. They are taking away your agency to speak for yourself. So what will happen? When you lose your freedom of speech, that is, the larger political actors, will start thinking for you. When you lose your ability to write or speak, then they are taking away from you the right to think properly. So he says that they will construct your sentences for you, even think your thoughts for you to a certain extent, and at need they will perform the important service of partially concealing your own meaning from yourself. So at times it happens that your intention or your idea of a particular thing that is happening in the society may vastly differ from whatever that the politician has to say. Maybe you observe a political or social phenomenon in a different way from that of a politician. But often what these politicians do is that by using their pamphlets or by using their political writing, they conceal your own convictions. They conceal your own meaning from yourself. Maybe you always stood for freedom, but the politicians may use certain words in such a way that it might seem that you are against freedom. Another example is maybe you are an advocate of non-violence, but the politicians may use certain words so convincingly in such a way that you might at times believe that it is okay to resort to violence. Okay, so you might even feel that it is okay to resort to violence. We shall discuss it in detail with the help of an example. Now, what Orwell means to say is that if you are using a vague prose or mushy or squishy prose, it is easy to manipulate people's mind. If you speak something clearly, outright, then there is a possibility of proper communication. And what would eventually happen is that people could see through your words and they could make a seasoned remark on whatever that you said. But at times what happens is that they make prose vague. They create a mushy or squishy prose so that they could easily manipulate the general public's opinions. Now, earlier in the essay, Orwell asserts that bad writing makes readers stupid. And again, in the earlier part, we discussed that bad writing often makes people stupid. Laziness leads to bad writing makes people stupid, which in turn leads to laziness, which in turn leads to bad writing. It goes on a circle. Now, here he takes this point a step further. Using the stylistic tools of bad writing makes the writer himself stupid. So what Orwell is trying to do here is that he is trying to state that bad writing can make a writer himself appear stupid. That is, as writers engage on lazy imitation, he loses his grip of reality, and with that grip, the ability to think critically. Often people run with the crowd, right? You always follow the herd. People have a herd mentality. So when a person raises their opinion, at times you may blindly believe them, because it is far easier to speak another person's words than come up with something which is genuine. So when a writer engages on a lazy imitation, when he takes cliched expressions, stitch it together and create a sentence, he loses a grip of reality and he loses his ability to think critically. When a writer uses cliched expression, he loses his ability to think critically. He won't come up with a genuine or a new expression. Now he will lose his ability to think critically at those times. Moving on, from bad writing more generally, Orwell moves on to describe political writing. And now from bad writing, Orwell is moving on to describe political writing. As he describes it, the majority of political communication, pamphlets, leading articles, manifestos and speeches of almost every party is horrible. And why is that so? If you have if you have gone through the election manifestos of certain parties or the pamphlets that they distribute, you might even come up with cliched expressions, right? There will always be a promise of good infrastructure facilities. There will always be a remark on the present government's corruption. So these are all cliched expressions. There is nothing new in these political pamphlets or articles or manifestos or even the speeches made by the party. Now the opposition leaders will always speak against the people who are ruling, the ruling party, and the ruling party would often dismiss the pleas of the opposition, and they use certain cliched expressions to do this. They don't come up with new words, but they use cliched expressions to do this, and this is horrible. And why is that so? Because when you use cliched expressions to express yourself, you are not expressing yourself clearly. You are just using words which were always there, stitching them together and making an opinion, which is akin to parroting meaningless phrases. It is like a parrot blurting out whatever that was said to it. So if you talk or if you speak with a parrot for some time, after some time, if the parrot is able to speak or respond back, it would take certain words from your speech and would in turn speak back at you. So this is known as parroting. Now, almost all political parties use the same cliched expressions, but the matters might change, the subject matter might change, but they use the same cliched political expression, bad prose, vague writing. And this political writing is largely horrible. It often creates miscommunication rather than communication. Now here, Orwell describes bad prose as being omnipresent. Orwell says that bad prose exists everywhere. It is omnipresent. Not the work of a single writer or limited to one medium. You cannot limit bad prose to the works of a single writer or to just one medium like pamphlets or manifestos. Bad prose can even be seen in great works of poetry and prose. Now, Orwell's primary argument is that normalization of bad style enables dictatorial politics. But what happens is that if you normalize cliched expressions, it would lead to dictatorial politics. Now, there is a tendency among politicians and the celebrities to sound scientific. Now, this can be considered as an instance of bad prose, right? So, there are instances in which politicians and celebrities would like to sound scientific. They might air their unscientific pseudo opinions like nitrogen can produce oxygen and the like. They will air their non-scientific pseudo scientific opinions, but they will be speaking it with such confidence that their followers would blindly believe them. So what happens here is that when they use the same cliched expression, the same style throughout, when they use the same style throughout, it enables dictatorial politics because it affects the person's ability to think. They are not coming up with a novel expression. They are just using the words which are already there. Oft-quoted cliched expressions are used repeatedly. And this in turn would lead to dictatorial politics because people here are trying to control the way in which you speak by using cliched expressions. Now, if you remember 1984, in 1984, Orwell came up with a speech which is known as Newspeak, which is a form of communication. It is short, concise, but people are able to or allowed to think in a limited manner. They are not allowed to express their emotions through words. They are allowed to think in a very limited manner. And this in turn would control the way in which you think, and it enables dictatorial politics. Now, why is it that when certain political parties come to power, they are totally against dissent? Now, what do you mean by dissent? Dissent means holding an opinion which is in variance with the official opinion. When you hold an opinion which is in variance with the dominant party's or official opinion or the ruling party's opinion, then that is known as dissent. Now, often what happens is that when certain political parties come to power, they try to silence the dissenters. They try to silence people with alternate opinions. In certain cases, they might pour ink on a writer or a reader who is a dissenter. They might even jail philosophers, teachers, academics and the like. And this is an instance in which politicians often try to control people's minds through speech. So there is no room for dissenters when certain political parties come to power. When certain dictatorial powers come to power, there is no room for dissenters. That is why even from time immemorial, many books were burned and banned at the time of dictatorship. At the time of Nazi dictatorship in Germany, many books were burned and banned because most of these books were written by dissenters. So, when you enable bad style or when you enable bad writing, you are in turn enabling dictatorial politics. When you are enabling cliched expressions in politics, you are in turn enabling dictatorial politics. Now again he hinges on the concept, again he reinforces the concept that bad prose is widespread. It can be found anywhere. It can be found in a political pamphlet, it can be found on a prose, it can be found on poetry. Bad prose is widespread. Now again Orwell introduces the concept of a spiral. If you remember, he had introduced the concept of spiral before when he said that laziness leads to the creation of bad prose, which leads to the creation of disappointment, which leads to the creation of, which lead again to laziness, which again leads to the creation of bad prose. So similar to that, Orwell argues that lazy writing makes the features of manipulation available. Even non-political speech has political consequences. Now what happens is that when you write lazily, you are in turn knowingly or unknowingly manipulating people. When you write lazily, when you use the off cliched expressions, you are knowingly or unknowingly manipulating people. Even non-political speech has political consequences. Even the speech that you think to be non-political has political consequences. It is said that you cannot speak without ever mentioning politics. You cannot escape politics from any spheres. Whenever you speak, then politics would inevitably will be there in your conversation. So even non-political speech has political consequences. Specifically, Orwell explains that a general atmosphere of inflated style allows for hazy communication to become the norm. So when people use inflated style, inflated expressions, then hazy communication or vague communication would become a norm. That is, when people resort to bombastic words, it would in turn lead to vague communication. Whatever that you intended to communicate with others won't be properly communicated if you use inflated style or bombastic expressions. When governments pick up on this norm, the inflated style or lazy writer becomes a tool for linguistic trickery for the defense of indefensible. Now there are certain matters of the world which are indefensible. That is, you cannot in any way justify certain actions, like the continuance of British rule in India or the Russian purges and deportations. You cannot justify these actions. You cannot justify the droppings of bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But people were able to skillfully justify their actions. Now, this happened at a time period in which, again, Orwell was writing this at a time period in which Second World War was happening or was taking place, and there was propaganda all over the world. The Allied forces as well as the Axis powers were propagating their propaganda. They were spreading their political intentions and political agendas. So when defenseless villages are bombarded from the air, or when the cattle are killed by machine guns, the dictators would say that this is a way of pacification. They are trying to pacify war, but they are killing millions in the name of pacification. When millions of peasants are robbed of their farms and sent trudging along the roads with no more than they can carry, this is known as the transfer of population or rectification of frontiers. Now, at the time of partition, this happened in India, right, where people were made to return back to either India or Pakistan. So people living in Pakistan were made to return. Hindus living in Pakistan were made to return back to India. And the Muslims living in India were made to return back to Pakistan. They had to leave all their belongings on the Indian soil or on the Pakistan soil, and they were made to cross the frontiers cross the boundaries. So often when large populations are asked to go on an exodus, the ruling party would say that it is just a transfer of population or a rectification of frontiers. They are just trying to rectify the frontiers. They are just trying to make a boundary or demarcating line between two nations. But when they do that, when we go through partition or the like, they are literally dividing the country on the basis of religion, on the basis of geographical area. If it was on the basis of geographical area, then well and good. But at times when it is on the basis of religion and the like, what happens is that people are unlawfully made to give up their property and settle in a foreign country. So when this happens, the political leaders might say that they are going through a period of transfer of population or rectification of frontiers, but in reality, they have to cross roads, they have to transcend their boundaries and reach a new place and settle down there. With nothing in their hands, they have to start a life anew. All these actions, which in no way can be justified by using certain words like pacification or transfer of population. Even killing, for killing they had a word like elimination of unreliable elements. When they killed the people in opposition, when they killed the dissenters, they said that it was an elimination of unreliable elements, where people were treated as commodities, people were treated as elements. So this is how language can be used for political oppression. When you normalize such linguistic trickery, it becomes possible to use language for political oppression. So Orwell's central argument in this section is that normalization of bad style enables oppressive politics. When you normalize bad writing or when you normalize bad style, it would in turn lead to oppressive politics. Now, mention of pacification thus serves as an evidence for Orwell's argument. So when millions are killed, they use the term pacification. When for government-sponsored murders, they use the term pacification. Again, shortly before the publication of this essay, the Nazi German government murdered thousands of Polish villages under what they call pacification operations. See the use of words. They used the term pacification operations to murder thousands of Polish villages. To plunder and murder thousands of Polish villagers, they used the term pacification operation. Instead of using the word murder, they use the term pacification. That is how they normalized language. They normalized inflated style and normalized political oppression. That is, through the guise of meaningless words, Nazi Germany enacted hideous violence. So through the disguise of meaningless words, words would seem meaningless for you and me. In the guise of those meaningless words, Nazi Germany enacted hideous violence. For the people all around the world, these were just pacification operations. Operations conducted to pacify or terminate, but they won't use the word terminate. Instead, they will use a word like elimination of unreliable elements. So using all these words, pacification, elimination of unreliable elements, they carried out mass murders. So in the guise of meaningless words like pacification, they enacted hideous violence. Now Orwell here also gives an example of an English professor in defending Russian totalitarianism. So an English professor once defended Russian totalitarianism. Now he talks about it thus, I quote from Orwell, Consider, for instance, some comfortable English professor defending Russian totalitarianism. He cannot say outright, I believe in killing of your opponents, when you can get good results by doing so. Probably, therefore, he will say something like this. So, an English professor cannot say that I believe in killing your opponents when you can get good results by doing so. You cannot outrightly say that I believe in killing, or I believe in non-violence, or resorting to non-violence when you get good results out of it. You cannot say that, but instead he will say something like this. While freely conceding that the Soviet regime exhibits certain features which the humanitarian may be inclined to deplore, we must agree that certain curtailment of right to political opposition is an unavoidable concomitant of transitional periods, and that rigors which the Russian people have been called upon to undergo have been amply justified in the sphere of concrete achievement. See, instead of saying it outright as I believe in killing in opponents when you can good results out of it, an English professor might use such flowery language to communicate the same idea. See the words that he used here. While freely conceding that the Russian regime exhibits certain features which the humanitarian may be inclined to deplore, here he is stating that while freely stating or freely agreeing that Soviet regime, he agrees that Soviet regime exhibits certain features which the humanitarian would be inclined to deplore. So certain humanitarians may deplore or despise or detest the Soviet regime's curtailment of political opposition. So what Soviet regime does here is just a curtailment of political opposition. So he believes that certain curtailment of right to political opposition is unavoidable concomitant of transitional periods. So when you are going through periods of transition, when you are going through great social changes, then you must curtail certain personal freedoms and you must try to curtail certain political opposition. So by curtailment here he means killing of people. You may have to curtail the right of political opposition in transitional period, he says, and that rigors which Russian people have been called upon to undergo have been amply justified in the sphere of concrete achievement. And he says that even when the Russian people are made to go through these unavoidable circumstances in which there is a curtailment of their personal liberties, indeed there is a curtailment of their own life, they are taken away from their own lives, which means that here he is justifying the government's action to purge or to kill off their opponents. He says that it is unavoidable and it is a concomitant of transitional periods. Concomitant means it naturally accompany transitional periods. So usually when you are going through periods of transition, when you are going through periods of great social change, people might curtail another person's freedom or right to opposition. The government might curtail the oppositions, they might curtail their right to political opposition. The government has the right to curtail or limit the right to political opposition. So for a healthy government to function, you must not totally silence the opposition. But when a government try to curtail the opposition, when a government try to silence the opposition, then there is something that we must be worried about. Then that is something that we must be worried about. But here he says that it is okay to curtail political opposition in transitional period. See the kind of words that he uses of quoted cliched expressions taken straightly from certain speeches and the like and pamphlets and the like, and using these words, what he is actually trying to communicate is that it is justifiable if you kill off your opponents if you get good results from doing so. And here he uses the word amply justified in the sphere of concrete achievement. So whatever that the Russian people have to go through, even if they have to go through purges, it is justifiable, because in return we get concrete achievement, we get good results by curtailing opposition's right to oppose. I hope that it was clear. Again, an analysis of those lines. To illustrate how a bad actor could use inflated style to manipulate audience, Orwell invents a hypothetical character, an English professor defending Russian totalitarianism. So this is just a hypothetical character. This is a character which arose in Orwell's mind. He then speaks of the voice that character. He then speaks in the voice of that character to show how a speaker could use inflated style to reframe the murder of political opponents by saying that certain curtailment of right to political opposition is an unavoidable concomitant of transitional period. So again, this English professor, he is using inflated style to reframe the murder of political opponents as curtailment of the right to political opposition. Instead of using the words murder of political opponents, he uses the word curtailment of the right to political opposition. Is an unavoidable concomitant, is an unavoidable accompaniment to transitional periods. So in transitional periods, it's okay to kill a few people. That's what he is intending to say, but he uses flowery language or inflated style to communicate the same. Orwell thus warns the reader that in the hands of a clever bad actor, that is, in the hands of a clever bad speaker, inflated style can make violence seem innocuous. So a bad person, but a clever but manipulative person, a clever but bad person can use inflated style and make violence seem innocuous. So a seasoned orator can make violence seem innocuous, which means that he can make violence seem harmless or inoffensive. So again, Orwell here is stating that a seasoned orator can use an inflated style to make violence seem not harmful, to make violence seem harmless. To echo this point that bad style enables deception, Orwell invents a hypothetical character with the same linguistic style as the real professor cited earlier in the essay. So again, in order to reiterate his statement that bad style enables deception, bad style enables manipulation, Orwell invents a hypothetical character with the same linguistic style as the real professor cited earlier in the essay. So remember, at the beginning of the essays, he cited many professors. Most of these professors had leftist sentiments, socialist sentiments. And he used the example of these professors. In the same manner, he is inventing a hypothetical professor who is using the same linguistic style to hide or manipulate people, to deceive people into believing that violence is harmless. So when you listen to that professor's speech, it seems like he is making out the point that violence is harmless. It is an concomitant, which means that it is an accompaniment to transitional period. Wherever there has been a transition, wherever that there has been a great social change, it was always accompanied by violence. That is what he is trying to say. So he is trying to make it clear that violence is harmless. But again, Orwell says that here, such professors are to be dreaded. You need to fear such professors who try to manipulate people's mind using a linguistic style, using inflated style. While Orwell does not mention the specific, his audience was likely aware of Russian leader Joseph Stalin's practice of silencing dissent via murder. Now again, Orwell is not here pinpointing at someone and saying that I am referring to this person and how he carried out murders and made people believe that it was okay to commit murders. Okay. So at the time period in which Russian leader Joseph Stalin lived, what he did was that he killed off his opponent. He killed off his dissenters. And then he used these words, these seemingly harmless words, these innocuous words to hide these murders. And he is referring to, in a way, though it is not explicitly stated, but by reading these lines we'll be able to understand that he is referring to Russian purges which were conducted by Joseph Stalin. Again, Orwell takes another example, this time from a political pamphlet. Orwell goes as far as to claim that relying on ready-made phrases can anesthetize the brain of well-intended writers. So, at times what happens is that when you rely on ready-made phrases, it can anesthetize the brain. It can make your brain feel numb. To illustrate how thought corrupts language and language can also corrupt thought, Orwell turns to a political pamphlet denouncing German fascism. So again, Orwell illustrates how thought can corrupt language, how your bad thoughts can create bad language. But bad language in turn can corrupt thought, can in turn correct your thinking capacity. So Orwell turns to a political pamphlet denouncing German fascism. As he describes it, although the writer has a worthy cause, he is unable to articulate his position in a meaningful way. So here he is taking a harmless pamphlet. Now he is taking a pamphlet which denounces German fascism, which speaks against German fascism. But here again, the author is using cliched phrases. So he is not able to clearly articulate his position in a meaningful manner. So he is creating a vague prose, and thereby he is not able to clearly communicate what he intends to say. Orwell thus argues that the culture of communicative vagueness makes people too stupid to meaningfully oppose political tyranny. So even people who are against political tyranny may resort to the use of meaningless words. Sometimes a person might be against political tyranny, but he might be using the same meaningless expressions to express his opinion, whereby he is again creating vague statements that the normal people may not be able to understand. So his intention was to speak against German fascism, but his language was vague, hence the others were not able to understand what he intended to speak. Again, quoting from the text, the author tells me that he felt impelled to write it. Again, Orwell here is saying that the author of the pamphlet who wrote against German fascism tells me that he felt impelled to write it. So in his writing, the author said that he felt impelled to write it. That is, the author felt a strong urge to write about it. I open it at random, and here is almost the first sentence that I see. So again, Orwell reads the first sentence from the political pamphlet. The Allies have an opportunity not only of achieving radical transformation of Germany's social and political structure in such a way as to avoid nationalistic reaction to Germany itself, but at the same time laying the foundations of a cooperative and unified Europe. Again, use of bombastic expression and inflated style. The Allies have an opportunity not only of achieving a radical transformation of Germany's social and political structure in such a way as to avoid nationalistic reaction to Germany itself, but at the same time of laying the foundation of cooperative and unified Europe. So here he is arguing for the Allies, and he says that the Allies would radically transform Germany. So again, he uses the words like radical transformation. You cannot bring about radical transformation. Even if a person says that you can bring about radical transformation is not possible when it comes to a country. You cannot quickly turn the events. You cannot radically transform the current plight of a nation. It takes years to transform a nation. So the word radical transformation there is an oft-quoted cliched word. Another thing is that he believes, sorry for the interruption in between. Another thing is that the author believes that The Allies can lay the foundation of a cooperative and unified Europe. Again, lay the foundation, which is again a cliched expression. He believes that the Allies can build a Europe. Europe is already built, right? You cannot lay the foundation of a nation which is already built. You can take it forward, but you cannot lay the foundation of a cooperative and unified Europe. What if Europe itself is unified? What if people are not able to see that properly? Now you see, again Orwell says, you see, he feels impelled to write, feels presumably that he has something new to say. Again, the author here is stating that he is impelled to write, he is urged to write, he has a so strong urge to write. So he must have something new to say. But again, like a cavalry horse answering the bugle, the words summon up. Now the words, they all come in a dreary pattern. They are all organized in the same old manner. He used the same cliched expressions like radical transformation and laying the foundation. These are all cliched expressions. This invasion of one's mind by ready-made phrases like lay the foundation, achieve a radical transformation, can only be prevented if one is constantly on guard against them. That is, a writer should himself feel that I should not use cliched phrases, I should not use ready-made expression. I must come up with something new. Only then will he be able to write properly. And every such phrase anesthetizes a portion of one's brain. And he says that when a writer uses such phrases, such off-quoted expression, it numbs his own brain. He is not using his brain properly. He is just using or quoting from another person. He is not using the brain properly. It is like you trying to plagiarize from Wikipedia entries. You are not thinking properly. You are just taking stuff from here, pasting it there, not even thinking properly about what you are trying to speak. So you need to think and then write. That is what the author is intending to say. Now Orwell expands on the stakes of his arguments. Now, what are the stakes of this argument? Stakes are what readers may gain or lose when they are accepting an argument. So when a group of readers accept an argument, they may gain certain things out of it or they may lose certain things. When a person agrees to an argument, he might gain a new knowledge, a new insight, or lose his presumptions. He may lose his preconceived notions about a certain argument. So using the anti-fascism pamphlet as an example, Orwell identified the ability to resist dictatorial politics as the stakes for his argument. So Orwell wanted to put forth to the readers that language can manipulate people, and in order to resist dictatorial politics, we must use language. We must correctly use language. We must not resort to cliched expressions, but we must come up with a new or novel way of expressing ourselves. Only then will we be able to resist dictatorial politics. In other words, he asserts that his discussion of language isn't esoteric or theoretical. Again, he is quoting an example from another political pamphlet. Now, the intention of that political pamphlet, which we discussed earlier, was to speak against the fascist Germany. But in doing so, again the author made use of cliched expressions and made the text more ambiguous. You cannot bring out radical transformation, but the moment a person talks about radical transformation, or when the moment a person talks about laying the foundations of a cooperative and unified Europe, it seems like he is just putting words into people's mouth. It feels like the person is not genuine because he is just using a string of words which was already there. There is nothing new to this phrase. There is nothing novel to this phrase. So he asserts that his discussion of language isn't esoteric or theoretical, and by stating such instances, first he quoted from an English professor and then he quoted from a pamphlet. So by quoting real life instances, he is asserting that his discussion on language isn't esoteric or theoretical. So Orwell here is stating that his discussion on language is not something which is obscure or abstract. It is not just an abstract thought, or it does not just exist in theory, it exists in practical life. He quoted two examples, one taken from an English professor speaking about the Russian Revolution, and the second came from a pamphleteer. In both these instances, they used bad language to express their political thought, to express their political agenda. So he says that, he asserts that his discussion of language isn't esoteric or theatrical. It's not something which is obscure or which is purely based on theory, but instead has urgent real world application. But his discussion on language has real world application. It is the need of the hour. We need to improve our language. Only then will we be able to free ourselves from the clutches of dictatorial politics. Only when we try to improve our language will we be able to free ourselves from the clutches of dictatorial politics. So his discussion on language has real world applications. Now, how can we end such a political tyranny on language? Interrupting the cycle of lazy literacy and political evils. Now, how can you interrupt, or how can you put an end to this lazy literacy, laziness, or political evils? To interrupt the cycle of lazy literacy and political evils, Orwell encourages more honesty in communication through more concise prose. So, how can you break free from the political tyranny? How can you break free from politically motivated expressions? Now, Orwell encourages honesty in communication through more concise prose. Now, when you write something, it must be concise, it must be short. Only then will you be able to honestly convey whatever that you wish to convey. The fewest and shortest words that will cover one's meaning. So, you may use the fewest words possible to speak. You may use the shortest words possible to speak to cover meaning. Orwell reiterates that relying on ready-made phrases is a particularly dangerous habit with the potential of blurring or even changing your meaning. So when you use ready-made phrases, it is a dangerous habit. Why is that so? Because you blur the meaning or you change the meaning. When you use ready-made phrases, you are often blurring the meaning. You are not making the meaning clear. Meaning is, evades, meaning forever escapes from your grip. So whenever you use ready-made expressions, you are blurring the meaning or you are changing the meaning. To this end, Orwell recommends writers spend more time thinking about truth before they begin writing. So again, Orwell says that you must be honest with your writing. You must think about the truth. You must think first. You must think properly, you must think about the truth and then start writing. And there again, you must start writing in a novel manner. You must come up with new phrases and expressions instead of using ready-made phrases and expressions. Your thoughts must be original. When your thoughts are original, your writing will be original. When your thoughts become original, your expression will also become original. And that is what Orwell is intending to say. With that, we come to an end to this brief lecture. Thank you for listening. Take care.